So today, I'd like to bring all of you yet another isekai series, but this here could potentially be one of the oldest isekai series out there, and it's the most straightforward honestly. After missing out on the funeral of his parents, an older otaku is basically beaten out of his home by his remaining siblings, and I mean literally beaten, they beat him with baseball bats. And if you think that's overkill, he kinda deserves it, because he's kind of a dick. Like, majorly. Anyway, while pondering his life and trying to figure out what he can do to repair it, he's run over by good old Truck-kun after trying to save a group of teenagers from a similar fate. Almost immediately, he opens up his eyes as an infant with a new pair of parents and a maid in a fantasy world. Yes, this is literally a reincarnation isekai. Anyway, with a new shot at life and deciding to live this one to the fullest unlike the last one, and now renamed Rudius, or Rudy for short, he sets out to learn the world and magic and, well, to get laid inevitably. Now, when I say the focus of our series is Rudy growing up, I mean it. Yeah, we obviously skip around a lot throughout the course of this growing up phase, but throughout the course of this novel, he hasn't left the single digits by volume's end, and yet Rudy still has the mindset of his previous life and his previous memories, with the higher understanding that comes with that age of being around 30 or so years old, which allows him to quickly study magic, and he's seen by others as a child prodigy because of it. So if you can't tell, this is a very slow starting series, and it's almost slice of life at this point in the series. In fact, there's almost no major conflict in this volume. Rudy spends most of it living life, learning magic, and trying to grow stronger and have a better life than this previous one, where he could categorize himself under the ugly bastard hentai tab. The most we get of conflict is what we learn of Rudy's father, Paul, and the fact he's been kinda banging the maid and has knocked her up. At the same time, Rudy's mom is also pregnant again with her second child. And this isn't going to be the first time we're going to hear about Paul's sexual exploits. It's kind of a recurring joke how much of a poonhound Paul is, and wondering if Rudy's going to take after him in that regard, which he kind of does, but that's also informed by his second life, or his previous life, so it's not as genetic. I'm going to say this now to clarify some things for later. In this world, polygamy is a thing and is not a big deal. And outside of one religion that focuses more on the whole mono relationship thing, which Rudy's mother is a part of, it's not seen as a big deal for people to have multiple partners or wives, which is why Paul's womanizing is not seen as that much of a negative thing, outside of the whole cheating on your wife aspect that is a negative thing in this volume. Also, Paul's not a follower of this religion, and it's revealed in the little after story thing that Paul and Rudy's mother only got together because she let him do it once and he knocked her up by accident, so they married because Rudy was being born. Just clarifying some things for some plot points that may show up a lot later. There's a lot of seeding in this novel, if you can't tell. One thing I can talk about what the novel does is how it switches perspectives every so often, from focusing on Rudy and him exploring the world and trying to figure out magic and all this stuff, to Paul, who's trying to figure out how does he raise his son and wanting his son to become a good sword master and all that stuff, to the maid, who is really creeped out by Rudy at first because he's a weird little baby, and then her growing respect for him after the whole pregnancy incident thing, and Rudy's magic teacher Roxy, who is also a little bit worried about Rudy at first but grows to like him over time, and other people that show up throughout the course of the story. It's kind of cool to see how the different characters see Rudy and his ongoing growth, as well as how he grows stronger and stronger throughout the course of the novel out of just his sheer willpower. So, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is in the latter half, Rudy meets and befriends a young girl who's basically an elf. I mean, their race aren't called elves, but they're basically the elves of this world, but their closeness puts both their parents a bit on edge due to noticing how codependent they're growing on each other. And also there's a bit of a joke where Rudy at first believes her to be a boy and then quickly learns in a rather weird way that she is in fact a girl, and tries to apologize for that when he thinks he screwed up their relationship. Anyway, this ultimately ends up with Paul showing Rudy the true gap in their skills in order to bring him to his senses and show him a true sense of fear, before sending him off and giving him a chance to basically make up his own desires of trying to go to magic school alongside his childhood friend, and giving him an extremely difficult task to accomplish that we'll talk about sometime later when we get to Volume 2. So overall, I do say I do like this story. It's a rather slow-paced, obviously, story of growing up with your second chance in the magical world. There's not a lot to say about Volume 1 outside of the character points that it sets up, especially for Rudy and the various other characters, especially Paul, who's a really important character, which you would hope the main character's dad would be an important character, but I'll speak about that stuff when we get to Volume 2, which should be relatively soonish if the lineup is okay enough. But let's just say I don't doubt they try to rush through this part of the story, and probably Volume 2 as well, when we get the inevitable anime, which has been announced and has a trailer, and I think may be coming out soon. I'm not sure, but it's still a fun story that I greatly enjoy, so looking forward to that anime being released, even if it's probably gonna rush through this part.